Welcome to the Balanced Blueprints podcast, where we discuss optimal techniques for health and finances and then break it down to create an individualized and balanced plan. I'm your host, John Proper, here with my co-host, Justin Gaines. In this episode, Justin and I talk about the popular topic of gut health. We go over what functional medicine doctors may have wrong about it and how to tell if you're experiencing gut issues yourself. Thanks so much for listening, and we hope you enjoy. So today, a huge topic in the health world, and I think we're getting more towards the tail end of it. It kind of blew up a couple of years ago. Gut health and functional medicine. So functional medicine was this huge wave of treating people's problems at the core. So not just addressing symptoms, but the root cause. And I think it had great intentions. People were really trying to shift of obviously not just do curative medicine of, you got a symptom, take this pill. Like, we want to address the root cause. But functional medicine in itself, I think this may aggravate some people because everyone loves it. They see it as the holy grail. I think it's almost turned into conventional medicine, but we're just using supplements and we're using tons of tests. And so I think everything kind of keeps shifting, and I want them to get back to it. But the reason I bring up this is they really put gut health on the map, which is huge and it's awesome. So we have a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, no, I definitely get what you're talking about there. Even like the biohacking community and a lot of that stuff has turned into here's a mushroom complex pill, and here's a multivitamin, but it's got all these special components to it and all these things that aren't normally in a multivitamin. And yeah, it's definitely become the magic bullet. Take this pill, it'll solve your problems.
Right. And it's improvement, we're looking for root causes. We're looking at lifestyle. So it's definitely improvement from the conventional, but at the same time, we don't want to spend all of our money on lab tests and supplements either. It's like, let's use the same ideology, but try and go about it a little different. And gut health is one of those topics that I think we can look at a little differently. They forget sometimes, and it's always shifting. So I think it's moving in this direction. The second brain basically is what a lot of these people in the space call it. And to break it down even, simpler, when people say, well, what the heck are you talking about gut health? Our bodies are covered in bacteria, viruses, other bugs too. Can't think of them, but our body, from our skin to our oral microbiome. So it's called the microbiome, our gut microbiome. There's concentrations on spots in our body that have very large amounts, and the gut is one of the ones that has, the biggest impact on our body. So that there's little bacteria kind of in our stomach running the show and telling us signals.
Yeah, which is always fun to talk about that or be reminded of it, just because you don't want to think about yourself as being covered in bacteria and bugs and parasites and all this stuff. And it's
it's weird.
That's what makes the world go round, right? Like it takes all of these things in order for it to balance out and work properly, but we don't like to think about it because it sounds like you're dirty, even though that's not necessarily true.
I think one of my classes in college, my teacher said, I gotta remember, but I think it's 5. My teacher said if you got rid of all the bacteria on your body, in and outside, you'd be 5 pounds lighter or something. Yeah, because there's more bacteria cells than human cells, I think, on and in the human. So it's an insane amount.
Wow. Yeah. That's hard to wrap your head around.
I know, because so that's why it's like, obviously we're human, but it's funny because people bring up the question, well, are we human or are we bacteria? Because without them, we wouldn't survive. We need these little guys, and we'll get into why and what they do and stuff. Justin just did a little look. That's what it was probably when I was in class, but they've updated it. So I think they said, you can correct me, but you said that's what they did say. It was 1 to 3% of body weight, but now it's 0.3%.
Correct. Yes. Used to be 1 to 3%. Now it's 0.3%, about 0.3%.
But either way, so we were looking at that, and Justin calculated it for a 180-pound individual. It was still, half a pound of bacteria?
Little over half a pound of bacteria, which is still pretty significant. I mean, when you talk about bacteria, I mean, that's significant.
I know, when you talk, you can't even see that. You know what I mean? So you can't even see them, and you have a half a pound of them.
I'm just thinking of you take those probiotics active live probiotics, and you
They
have one
say
of those little
billions.
tablets. They're tiny and they weigh, less than a gram,
I know.
and you're talking about half a pound. I mean, that's significant. That's a lot.
Yeah. So needless to say, these little bacteria, these bugs, they call them, are very important. And it is crazy to think about. And Justin, you actually brought up a good thing earlier too, that it kind of gives you like the heebie-jeebies to think about, like, yeah, you're covered in that bacteria head to toe. And I think that's a great segue of, because what I was talking about earlier, a lot of people in the health space or functional medicine space really focus on, like, the gut is the controller. But I've seen more data and kind of newer research showing that the environment might be a bigger control. So, like, what I mean by that is, I guess this isn't really the functional medicine space, but you'll see so many things pushed for, like, sterile environments. Like, we live in, really sterile houses, antibacterial soap, antibacterial wipes, Lysol kills 99.9% of bacteria, all this crazy stuff that I'll get into it, but you kind of laugh at that stuff when I've seen some of this other research and some of the ways these other people live, like, out in nature, because you're doing a real disservice and a real harm to your body and the bacteria on your body, because these guys protect you. Like, don't get me wrong, you can get an imbalance of bacteria. We want the right balances, the ones that help us. But sometimes those antibacterial products actually kill the good ones and then create it's almost like they cleared out a house. Now you have an empty house and the bad ones can almost come in easier, So those good ones, you want them there because then there's less space for the bad ones to come in. They can fight off the bad ones. So it's just funny because, yeah, I think especially in the Western world, we're so used to, like, bacteria is terrible, antibiotics, we need them, like, oh, clean your hands, clean everything, clean. And I mean, especially
all the marketing messages that get pushed to sell products.
Yeah, exactly. And it sounds great because who wants to be dirty? But it's not like these guys are dirty, but playing in the soil, dirt, is actually probably way better than that. So,
well, it's crazy because, like, growing up on a farm, we hardly ever, we being, fellow farmers or also just, family members, hardly ever got sick. But then you'd go to school and, people would be going through their normal cycles of, like, hacking off a lung in the middle of winter and all this sort of stuff, and just, your normal sickness windows. And if I got sick once a year, it was like crazy. And, like, this, we always used to say, it's like, oh, we're outdoors. We're constantly out there doing stuff. And, when you're working on a farm and you have a burger for lunch, you're not going and washing your hands.
right.
You're typically brushing them off on your pants and just eating it. So you're definitely getting a lot more bacteria into your system by doing that. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that now the research is coming out and suggesting that potentially has a large impact on your body as a whole, not just your immune system, but your body as a whole.
Yeah. And so I guess so I can get specific into it. So there's one researcher who does gut health, and we'll have to go into it a lot more in another episode. But the general, information about his research is he followed tribes in Africa, a couple different ones. He lived with them for months. And some of the stuff when you watch it is insane that, like, they're doing, like, their food, their dinner table is the ground. They wash their hand in the same water that monkeys pooped in and they drink from that water. And, they're eating a lot of, like, when they freshly kill an animal, some of the stuff was wild. So it's crazy for people to hear, but I think they'll eat the intestine where some of the feces was, and things that obviously I'm not saying go do, because it's insane, but we would also get sick. Actually, that's an important thing because we weren't born into that environment. We don't have that microbiome they have, but they have one of the best, quote unquote, on paper, microbiomes because of the sheer variety and amount of bacteria they come in contact with. And that's actually what protects them. So it's something that might normally make us sick. And that's why I think it's even crazier to note, like, you don't want to eat undercooked raw meat 24/7. If you eat a piece of undercooked meat by accident, you should be fine. But I think that's one of the things where in today's Western world, where we don't have a lot of diverse microbiomes, diverse bacteria, things like, undercooked meat once really hurt us because we don't have the built up nice bacteria that actually protect us from that. And undercooked meat is just a simple example. There's a million. I'm not promoting that or talking about it in any way, but that's something they did. And you see them being protected because of their environment, the amount of animals they come in contact with. They actually showed that the drinking water, I think, was the area where they picked up the most bacteria because other animals came to drink from it. So bacteria from the animals went in the water, and it's like a whole sharing environment. So you only get that by being outside. So I think the newer research is showing being in nature and being outside and exposed to more areas is actually what's really causing a much stronger, more resilient microbiome than, some of what's previously thought. And we'll go into what's previously thought too, because those are the easy things to do day to day.
Right. Sanitizing the counters constantly, wiping everything down.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that you shouldn't do that, but it's just saying that too much of anything is a bad thing.
Definitely. So that's just a little bit of why I think there's some missing pieces in the microbiome talk. And if you're interested in it, you can look more into that. But I think environment, your light plays a bigger role in it, like getting natural sunlight, a lot more than previously thought. But we'll go into like the basics here too of, okay, you're new to this. What's it mean to me? So like we talked about.
To pull it into like back to the holistic nutrition piece, I mean, I know I kind of briefly brought it up, but are you suggesting that taking a probiotic or a prebiotic is better than doing nothing, or should you just are there foods in your diet that you can do that? I know yogurt typically has a very high ability to populate that biome. What are some ways that, because we live in this hyper sanitized world, that we can adjust this and start to bring back that microbiome?
Yeah, great question. Starting with probiotics. So I'm always going to do a food first approach, no matter what. And we've gone over, maybe we haven't, we'll probably do an episode on this. Supplements, I like to use them as tools, as supplements. They're, what their name implies. But you should be getting everything from food. Now, probiotics, though, from the research I've seen, are really one of the last ones I would probably take. So I would really start with food first approach, just because there's very few probiotics on the market that actually get the probiotics in the pill to the spot they need to go. They either get destroyed in the stomach acid because they're not encapsulated in a proper pill, and they end up kind of just being an expensive, waste of money, versus starting with food first, or like we talked about, nature. So going outside, kind of playing in the dirt, that's a good one. But then foods would be, anything fermented. Yogurt is a great one. That's yogurt and kefir. Those usually are the ones that have great effects on people, help build the gut. Sauerkraut, that's just the most common, but really they ferment any vegetables, any type of cabbage, carrots. You can find those in stores pretty easy. Kombucha is another, very kind of trendy one, but that does have tons of probiotics in it. Fermented tea. What else are we thinking here? I think those are the main ones that really come from the store. And, all those are doing, like you said pro and prebiotics. The probiotics are really just putting the bugs already in the food into your stomach, but the prebiotics are like more food for them. So starchy foods, they say one of the best prebiotics. And these can give people problems. We'll go into that. Like it gives you bloating, but if you're in a good state, good prebiotics are like you cook potatoes, you cool them. It's kind of a weird thing, but you cook, cool them, and then reheat them later. It actually builds resistant starch in foods. So that actually gives it more of a resistant starch is more food for your bacteria than it is for you. So when you cool the food, it builds it. I think green bananas have a lot too, like plantains. But yeah, those are more prebiotic foods that feed the gut bacteria.
Interesting. I never would have thought that cooking a food, cooling it, and then reheating it would have a
I know, isn't that weird?
Impact on it. It's like you hear about food, you cook it, and that could destroy the nutrients. You don't ever hear about food, you cook it, cool it, and then reheat it, and that actually does something else to it completely.
I know, it goes on topic of our last episode where we were talking about plant-rich animal foods and like cooking spinach and adding other nutrients to it. Like it actually helps them, and it's so weird. I mean, I don't even know how someone finds that out. They test potatoes right after they cook. Then they test potatoes cool in their fridge for a week. But yeah, it builds those resistant starch that feed your microbiome. So the other thing that's important to note is I think a lot of functional medicine, practitioners or people in the space will also just say, okay, we have gut problems. Let's throw in this probiotic. So now the problem there, and I'll even lump them together. Let's throw in this probiotic pill or foods that have probiotics in them. So the problem with that, you can't have good bacteria growing in your gut if your gut is in an inflamed, stressful state. So if you throw new beneficial things at it, like probiotics, probiotic foods, it may help a little, but if you have bad bugs in there or viruses or other things, it's not going to do a lot. It's kind of like using a sprinkler if your house is on fire. Like, it's going to do something, but you really need to fix the environment of your gut before you start introducing these beneficial foods. And that's kind of where we can get into things you need to take away or heal.
Yeah, I was going to say, so go down that path. What does that look like? So, because I've always thought, like when I've been feeling off, irregular, whatever, I'll take a probiotic or prebiotic typically it's a pro and a free in the same capsule, same time. Because I'm definitely guilty of being that, as being that supplement guy who's more than happy to take a supplement and take that easy road out. But that's interesting. So you're saying that, if you're feeling that way, or you feel like you have a gut issue, that's not the most effective way to do it. So what would be, what should I be doing instead?
Yeah. So, and I'll differentiate two people here because I'm talking from experience of, I had a very inflamed gut where as soon as I ate a meal, like 2 bites in, very bloated, serious gut problems versus someone that may, like you said, you feel off. So, I think this is helpful for both people, but for like someone in my situation or anyone feeling extreme gut discomfort, and just to go quickly over that, tons of bloating. You shouldn't be super bloated after eating. Bloating after certain foods, garlic, onions, vegetables, stomach pain, irregular bathroom schedule, things like that versus just someone off. So this is a lot more important for that. But what it looks like is a lot of things can throw off our gut. We talked about earlier, I said it's the second brain. First biggest one, in my opinion, I think the one that gets probably overlooked, stress. So the vagus nerve is a nerve that literally connects from your gut to your brain. Signals go both ways. It's not a one-way street. So if you're stressed in the head, sounds funny to say, but if you're having mental stress, it talks to the gut and it creates inflammation in the gut. And then you may hear this term a lot, leaky gut. Leaky gut is just when there's little micro tears and things get into your system that shouldn't. So I know we're going off on a lot of tangents, but just to say the leaky gut, that's just your gut has a lining. When you eat food, it really doesn't actually ever enter your body technically. There's a barrier that allows certain nutrients in and keeps other things out. But when you have leaky gut, there's little tears in it that kind of let things in that shouldn't. And that's when a lot of people have problems. So mental stress can do that. A poor diet, standard American diet, a lot of bad junk food, a lot of sugar. And so what we want to do, to get back on topic, is we want to build a stronger, healthier, nicer environment for these bacteria to live in. So we want to get rid of junk food. We want to help, our stress levels. We want to get sunshine. We want to go outside. We want to get adequate sleep. The normal things that kind of cure everything, because they're hard to do, but they're they're not complicated things. They're just hard to do consistently. So those things, we want to prioritize those. And then we really want to cut out foods that might be irritating it. So we went over a little bit of this last time, but certain vegetables, if people have SIBO, if they have other gut issues, whether it's bacteria or a virus or fungal infections, we want to cut out foods that are giving problems. It's only going to be temporary, but if you eat onions and they bloat you and you hear, well, onions and garlic, they're the healthiest food for me in the world, and you keep forcing them, like they're not at the moment because they're fermenting in your gut and causing problems. So you want to cut out those foods. So be conscious of when you eat, how does my gut feel? And then we want to incorporate things like bone broth. So bone broth is I think the simplest healer, that it was described to me that when you drink bone broth, the glycine in it, the amino acid kind of coats the stomach. That's what the gut lining is made out of. So it kind of repairs it. And if you drink real bone broth, it's like sticky, liquidy. So that's going to help collagen. Digestive bitters are kind of an aid. So if you acidic things like vinegars, if you eat those with certain vegetables and foods.
So what I'm hearing there is, stress management all the way around. So mental stress, sleep stress, make sure you're on a good sleep pattern. Food, do an elimination diet. Things that are bothering you, don't consume those for now, even if they are a superfood and really good for you on paper. Right now, if they're bothering you, stay away from them until you can slowly start to introduce them back in. But the one thing that I guess I get caught up on is, so you say eliminate junk food, but like, what do you mean by that? Do you mean high carb foods? Do you mean, bad fats? Are you talking like empty calories? Like when you say junk food, I feel like it's a relative term, right? So there's, if you're constantly eating McDonald's, some TV dinners might not be as junky as constantly eating McDonald's. You know what I mean? Like there's layers of junk food here. So like, what should we be pulling out? When you say junk food, what are you thinking of? What are you picturing in your mind? And what should we be staying away from? Like, give me 3 or 4 that like we should just definitely not be consuming if we're trying to reheal our gut.
Yeah. These days, I think of junk food as anything made in a lab, which sounds crazy, but like if it wasn't made outside, it's junk food. So, but to kind of really narrow it down, number 1 would be any packaged really high sugary food. Like that's going to harm the gut and that's going to feed bad bacteria. I don't like to say all sugar is bad. A lot of people do that. I eat plenty of carbs, but the processed sugar that comes from zebra cakes, fudge brownies, anything in a box, out. Like if you want to heal, get rid of it. Number 2 would be probably foods that cause inflammation. So like inflammatory oils. I would just try and opt for better oils. We know the seed oils are usually what cause problems for people. Canola, rapeseed, safflower, all that. So just make the easy switch to an olive oil. And actually, something that I really like to push that helps me is coconut oil is a great oil if you're having gut problems because it's obviously a healthy oil to eat, but it has antibacterial and antiviral properties. So it's good to consume that because it helps the gut. So that's kind of an easy thing. If you're having gut problems, like just use that oil because it's kind of a double whammy.
And so being that it's antibacterial, that's not going to kill the good bacteria, or how does that work? Because obviously, we've already talked about how there's good and bad.
I know.
Does antibacterial mean anti-all bacteria, or does it just somehow work really well with the good bacteria and eliminate the bad?
Right. So we'll have to look into it more, but I imagine it's the type of bacteria, just like how sugar feeds certain bacteria, like sugar is known to feed the bad bacteria in your gut. I imagine the coconut oil is known to not create a great environment for those bad bacteria because obviously all bacteria are different. There's different strands. You'll see that in probiotics. So I imagine, that oil
right. It probably works similar to like our saliva because our saliva is antibacterial as well.
Right.
That's why you have that disgusting feeling in your mouth when you wake up, and that's because you haven't been producing saliva because otherwise you'd choke on it.
Right.
But naturally, obviously, your saliva is not killing the bacteria in your stomach either, so it's got to be antibacterial in that capacity. But for sake of time, one other question to drive us home, I think, is obviously I brought up the fact of when I'm feeling irregular. We've talked in our personal lives about we know when we're feeling irregular. I've heard that back knee is acne on your back is one of the ways that you can tell. But what are other ways that people can self-identify if they've never thought about it or haven't gone down this health path of like, oh, my gut actually doesn't feel well? Because for some people, and even myself before I went heavily down the health path, I didn't realize how bad my gut felt because that was normal. So what are some key indicators or leading indicators of improper gut balance and just feeling off, or how do you know that you're off?
Yeah, that's a good one because they can be a little sneakier. So we'll start with the one you brought up. there's, like we talked about the microbiome in our gut, there's a microbiome on our skin. So our skin's covered in bacteria. If we have an imbalance of the wrong bacteria on our skin, that's going to cause issues. And this can be looked up. There's like Chinese medicine. There's charts that show where bacteria on the body means maybe where the problem is in the body. Not saying that's, foolproof, but it's usually pretty accurate. And you'll see that bacteria usually like on the chin is SIBO related. So small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. Bacteria in other areas will be yeast related. So like yeast overgrowth or yeast infections. So that's kind of a cool way to see if I'm having a lot of acne. I don't think you just hit the unlucky lottery or it's genetic or it's this. There's something off that the gut is causing problems. Your bacteria on your body is not proper. So like tons of acne, that's kind of the first one. And definitely you can look up again, like Chinese medicine, acne diagram.
I'm gonna look that up because I'm thinking of like the acupressure that, like a foot massage, like a Thai foot massage, where they know different pressure points in your foot. I'm thinking they probably have, based on what you're saying, it sounds like it's something similar to that.
Very, very. And, the Chinese medicine it's pretty spot on with a lot of things. So it's awesome. And that's a good chart to see, different spots on the face, on the back, on the body. So acne being a big one of my bacteria, my microbiomes, they're off on my skin and my gut, in my mouth. And, it's not usually just off in one spot because everything's connected. So that being one. Then there's a lot of sneaky ones. Like you said, brain fog is a big one. A lot of people don't realize, like, I'm feeling cloudy. I'm not able to focus well. We talked about the gut's the second brain. If you're eating junk food, if you're stressed, if your gut's inflamed, your brain's going to be inflamed. You're going to feel it. So brain fog. Another big thing is if your system's moving really well, we can, like, if you're dialed in, your bowel movement really should be in the morning time. Like usually your body detoxifies at night, does a lot of those things. So you get rid of a lot of that in the morning. Now, it depends a lot on people's eating schedule too. If they eat at different times, like if someone eats really only late into the night, it might throw it off. But, if you're a normal human being eating 3 meals a day, generally you should, and we can make it even simpler, you should be going to the bathroom around the same time each day. That's kind of important. Consistency there. So those signs, I think those
are the big ones that I had. The back knee, the brain fog. The brain fog was a big one.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done some stuff. I know we talked about when I did that diatomaceous earth gut cleanse that I felt like we tried researching it, and there's like hardly any scientific research that suggests it. Any scientific research that suggests that it would work is very small sample sizes, and so not something that you can really hang your hat on. But N of 1.
Yeah, you're experimenting.
I had huge, like, that first day, I took way too much in that. And I remember telling you that I took way too much and I was so bloated. And everything that I read that when I was going into it was that's die-off. It's bacterial. It's not bacterial. It
was it viral?
No, it was saying that there is parasitic die-off. Parasitic die-off, increasing the nitrogen in your bloodstream and all this stuff that would cause you to bloat like that. I didn't think it was going to work. So I was like, I can take the max amount that they say to take. And oh my gosh, I didn't sleep that first night. And the second night into the first week, like my brain fog was completely lifted. But again, I didn't realize that I even had the brain fog. I thought I was dialed in most of the time. And then when it was gone, it was crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, you don't realize how bad you feel until you feel good. And this whole episode was a super brief overview because, like you said, that supplement, there's oil of oregano, there's tons of herbs. We'll go into, I'm sure, in future episodes, exact protocols and a lot easier ways of like, okay, you have this gut issue, this is how we can tackle it. There's actually way more than I thought we'd have. So we'll have a lot more to go into for sure.
Right.
Thanks for listening to our podcast.
We hope this helps you on your balance freedom journey.
Please share your thoughts in the comments section below.
Until next time, stay balanced.